Hello and welcome to another Tuesday Talkie on the Bearfoot Miniatures channel. Today we will be going over the Orcs and Goblin Tribes army list. I will be doing a separate video on the Arcane Journal lists and content within that book, just because, especially going through these, like all of the units that is in the Orcs and Goblin Tribes, there is a lot. There is a lot. So yeah, we're going to split it up along those lines. And yeah, let's get off into the general view of the list, like what's the strengths and weaknesses. So the the list can obviously largely be split down into two things: the orcs and the goblins. I know, who knew? Orcs generally obviously higher toughness. They're all similar movement speed. Goblins obviously much cheaper, more access to warband, more access to horde. Versus the orcs, where you're going to be getting obviously higher toughness units, more units with chopper, which is one of the key special rules for adding AP value additions to weapons. Now, overall, it is an aggressive army list. That's shown by the impetuous rule, though if you set up your army in certain ways with the usage of Black Orc units, you can stop one of the key drawbacks of the army, which is that you can lose control of units within bubbles. Now, that drawback is the impetuous rule, which is on most units except for like characters and war machines, shamans specifically for the characters, I think. And it means that half of the time your units, if they are in charge range, will have to charge. So on a one, you roll a dice if you are in your maximum possible charge range with the unit. On a 1 to 3, you're forced to declare that charge. This is obviously a big change from previous editions where you had animosity, which I know it made the army really or near unusable in tournament settings, but I actually think the animosity rule for orcs and goblins was one of the most flavoursome rules in all of Warhammer Fantasy. Now, it's good to see a little nod to that still within the Orcs and Goblin Tribes list, though obviously getting the Black Orcs in the list, it sort of just strips it out that bit of flavour. So yeah, you've got tough units, largely high model counts. I mean, like say, even Black Orcs are quite cheap for what they're doing, so you do get quite high model counts. But then these certain downsides with them being quite unruly, and actually a couple of little downsides of being a bit more, how to say it, unreliable in the effect that units are having. So in that, we're going to get a number of special rules. Big ones we can get to when we get to orc units. Choppers is across all of orc units, so we'll go through that now. That's during a turn in which a model charged, it can re-roll to wound rolls of 1 and improves the armor piercing of its weapons by 1 for all mundane weapons. Now, this is similar to the rules where you get, say, Gromril weapons or ensorcelled weapons in Dwarves and Chaos, respectively, except it affects the AP value of great weapons, cavalry spears, rather than just being on hand weapons. But the drawback of it, or the flip side of it, is that it's only when you've charged it. So this is the like aggressive nature of the army that you're sort of funneled into. You get these big benefits, but with the drawback of you going to have to be actively engaging the enemy with the charge. We've got the fear of elves. So this is on a lot of goblin units. Elves cause fear in your goblins. So if they, you could just, with your low leadership of goblins, just be absolutely petrified if elves ever outnumber you. Luckily, because you've got such a low points value on most goblins, you're going to have a lot more goblins normally than the elf units. So therefore, the fear doesn't really kick in until you're actually reduced below the strength of the elves that you're engaging. Ignore Goblin Panic. This is a pretty much an orc-wide rule. If a goblin panics or is destroyed, breaks and flees from combat within 6 inches of an orc, or in any army within 6, if a unit breaks and flees, flees from combat within 6 of a unit, you would normally have to take a panic check. Orcs ignore that in Goblins because they just expect it from the Goblins. So actually having these mixed armies of having chaff along with your Orcs, which are obviously more like higher power units. Let's just say freeze. Yeah, your Orcs don't give a crap if the Goblins break from combat. It's a real nice rule. It means that the Goblins don't have to have levies, which would give a whole host of other downsides to ignore that panic. So it's a nice little rule that I think is flavoursome for the army. Ignore panic in general. You ignore panic in general. Quell impetuosity. So whilst within 6 inches of a unit with this special rule, so that's going to be your Black Orcs, other units with impetuous can choose to ignore the impetuous special rule. I don't know when you would choose to take the impetuous special rule, because if you wanted to charge, you wouldn't even have to roll for impetuosity really, because you go into charge. Tuskor charge, very powerful special rule on boars, +1 strength and -1 AP. Really nice for just boosting the power of orc mounted units. Again, it's on the charge, so playing into the aggressive nature. The wah, and I'm not going to do it anymore animated than that. You get enough out of me on the Necromunda games with the Ogren skill. The Wah special rule, once per game during the command phase, you may attempt to invoke the power of Wah by making a leadership check of the character with Wah special rule. If it's passed until the start of the next turn subphase, then the mount and any orc unit which they've joined re-rolls failed to hit rolls of natural 1 when calculating the combat result, gain +1 bonus. So essentially when you've done your charge, because you're going to be re-rolling the natural ones anyway if you've got choppers, basically it stacks really nicely with choppers in that you're re-rolling ones to hit with the War special rule, and then choppers on the charge will allow you to be re-rolling the ones to wound, and it makes you more likely to break that unit with the +1 combat result point to get your opponents in a Fabigo loop, especially with things with, like, say, cavalry spears, things like that, is a nice special rule to add. War paint for a 6-up ward on lots of orc units to make them savage orcs. 6-up ward, I'm never massively in favour of, but we'll get into it. So I tend to start off these guides with a character to give context to the magic items, and we'll start off with what I would say is the most common character that you will see, at least in an Orc and Goblins army. If you were setting up your army, let's say optimally, I think you're going to be wanting some Black Orc units and Black Orc bosses, because it quells impetuosity, so you will be able to control your units better. Black Orc war bosses are the hardest unit in the Orc and Goblin list, or the characters list. So for 135 points, you get movement 4, which is meh. Weapon skill 7, which is solid. It's like Chaos Lord level of good for weapon skill. You've got BS skippable. Strength Toughness 5, which is really, really good. Both Chaos Lord level. 3 wounds, so 1 down on a Chaos Lord. But Initiative 6, really good. 4 attacks and Leadership of 9. So really dependable, a really good combat character. And 135 points is actually a bit of a steal for what the unit is. And I think that's something that's reflected across the entire list, is an actual lower than average points value for what I would consider for the stat lines that you tend to be getting. So Empire of Man, Masters of the Knightly Orders, for the same amount of points, you're going to be getting Strength and Toughness 4 in place there. And I think in Weapon Skill 6 as well, rather than Weapon Skill 7, for the same amount of points. You also get full plate armor on both the War Boss and Big Boss, which is actually really, really good. They always used to have heavy armor. The 4-up save just makes them so reliable. You can take a shield for 2 points to get a 3-up. They great things to be said about them. Now, on the weapons front, obviously you can take a cavalry spear for 2 points if you're mounted. My personal taste, and you might have heard me say this a million times by watching other videos, great weapons, because it's the -2 AP, without access to lances in the Orcs and Goblins list, great weapons being a source of AP2, actually going to AP3 when you're charging because of the choppers rule that is on most Orc units is a real solid choice. And for 4 points, it's nothing to sniff at all. You've got the Da Boys special rule, which means that for every Black Orc boss, be that war boss or big boss, you've got to take a unit of Black Orcs and vice versa. So it's always a 1-for-1 choice, even if that unit doesn't have to join the Black Orc, or even if your Black Orcs don't have to be joined by the war boss or big boss. I actually think that spreading out if you've got a unit of Black Orcs, spreading out your Black Orc boss or big boss war boss into another location on the battlefield to quell impetuosity in multiple locations is really good. Obviously, you can make a real hard unit that is going to be one of the best heavy infantry units in the game by putting your bosses and big bosses in there. But having multiple instances of quelling impetuosity across the list has real benefits to it. So it's something to bear in mind when you're setting up your units, and at least when you make an army list, I tend to not have a set place to put characters. I always try and think where is the optimal place to place it if everything is perfect, but also have an idea of how else I'm going to use it for alternate setups. So you might have one game where you have them in Black Orcs, and then other games where you're like, I actually need impetuosity on my other flank, so you split them up. So try not to get locked in to always being like, this is the setup for this exact unit, and it's always going to be like that. Especially when you put in quell impetuosity in multiple places, I think there's a lot to be said for it. Furious Charge, applying to your model, not the mount, means +1 attack on the charge, so stacking forwards into this aggressive, always be charging nature. You've got Rallying Cry to reroll failed rally tests within your general's aura. You've got the Wah special rule. So you're on a leadership check, you can obviously reroll your wands to hit, as well as gaining +1 combat res, real useful. And you've got the Ignore Panic special rule, because you just don't care about Orcs or Goblins running away from you, around you. Now, in terms of mounts, for the Black Orc boss, you can be put on like a boar or something, but wyverns, to give an 18-inch bubble of your command range, I think there's a big shout for. And obviously we're playing in, at the moment, I think tournaments have like sorted out dragons, or at least to an extent. But if you're playing like down the club, dragons are king shit. I think we all know by now. Or they're at least very hard to deal with. And a Black Orc on a Wyvern for 135 points is definitely worth it. You go to Toughness 6, you get 7 wounds, and it adds an additional 3 Strength 6 attacks, 2 of which are AP -2, and 1 of which is with the Venomous Tail, which strikes first poison attacks. Now, I'm less enamored with the Venomous Tail because it's not got the AP -2. Said this in the Imperial Griffin, said it on the any serrated maw you've ever heard me talk about. I prefer to be able to just put all my attacks into the Wicked Claws, but granted, it just is what it is. Causing Terror to help break enemy units is brilliant. Stomp attacks D3. Well, because it's not a Behemoth, it's not got the AP -2 that, like, say, full dragons have, and it's not got D6 stomp attacks, but it's still a formidable opponent, and it will ensure more chance of charging because of the fly that comes along with it. Now, the Black Orc Big Boss, I think, is actually a really good platform to have a battle standard bearer on. Because you're so tough, because you've got better weapon skill, an orc war boss, sorry, the terms are just getting mixed in my head, you're going to get hit on a 4 in more situations than you would with, a normal orc big boss, which it only takes weapon skill 6 to hit you on a 3. God, that's a confusing sentence. Because of being in amongst the ranks and being able to take the furious charge, to provide war in different places, to have the weapon skill 6, meaning your opponent needs weapon skill 7 to hit you on a 3+, I think is massive for your battle standard bearer's survivability, as well as the orc character toughness 5 being a good bonus, versus say when I think about paladins or captains of the empire being toughness 4, they tend to die quite easily. So let's get on into the magic items list now that we've got a bit of context with where the Black Orc and at least some characters stand within the general setting of the old world. So starting out with magic weapons, this is one that is always sort of a low point for me in the magic item list. I tend to like the generic magic item lists more than I like the faction specific ones, because I find that the magic weapons in general I find to be slightly overcosted and not allowing you to take the award, regen, whatever you have here, along with good magic weapons. You maybe just get a decent weapon for much higher price. But we'll see. The battle axe of the last big war for 75 points, you get +2 strength, -2 AP, an extra D6 attacks, which is really tasty, but you have strikes last. So you're basically a great weapon with magical attacks, an extra attacks D6. I quite like it for the output, but where it sits at the 75 points, I think excluding you from a ward or a regen, or a ward to speak of, is too much of a price to pay for the extra attacks. Especially, I suppose you could get away with it on a wyvern a little bit more when you've got 7 wounds or something like that, maybe on a chariot. But I think as it stands, just looking at the base profile, forgoing that protection, I don't think is good enough. And even I suppose on a wyvern or a chariot, I prefer the ward on my general anyway. Porco's Pig Sticker for 40 points. You get +1 strength, -1 AP. So that's something you'd be getting on chopper rules anyway. So it doesn't apply to the Pig Sticker because it's a magical weapon. You get Armor Bane 1, magical attacks. It can only be used in the first round of combat and can only be taken by a mounted model. So it's basically a cavalry spear. And for every rank that your opponent has, you get an additional attack. Now, there is definitely a little bit to be said for that, because it's 40 points. It still allows you to take, say, Trollhide Trousers, which will feature later in the list, in the magic items list. It's a one-handed weapon, so you can take a shield along with the Pig Sticker. So you Black Orc boss can be on a 4-up, a 3-up with the shield, and then getting more attacks for charging into, say, the side of a big ranked up unit. So there is something to be said for that, more of a blender lord than a challenge lord, but you do then have to be wary of the more heavily armed opponents, because at AP -1, you're actually going to be doing worse against those heavily armored things than with a mundane great weapon when you charge. The choppiest chopper for 35 points, you get strength +1, AP -3, and magical attacks. Now, this is one that I actually like a little bit more. For 35 points, I can get the Trollhide Trousers and still have 25 points left over for other things. The AP -3 is the same as a great weapon with the chopper special rule, but it's all the time. I'm going to have strength 6 anyway, because I'm a Black Orc boss looking at this now. So I'm going to be wounding a lot of things on 2s, and other than dragon mounts and stuff like that, I'll be strength 6 wounding on 3s against toughness 5. So just the reliability of that AP -3, as well as not taking up a second hand and being all the time, not strikes last. I do actually quite like this. So it's one of the few lists that I look at of the magic weapons and go, oh, I actually quite like this. Wallopers One Hit Wonder for 15 points. It's a one use, strength 10, AP -3, magical attack, strike first weapon. It can only be taken by Goblin and Night Goblin bosses. When you have used the profile that's presented, it then just becomes a hand weapon with magical attack special rule. Now, for 15 points, that's something that you can throw on at the end if you've got a little bit of points left in your list. And to be strength 10 at AP -3 on a Goblin and strikes first, I think is incredibly good. Because it can cancel out elves, you can get into a challenge and maybe sneak off a bit of wounds on a Lord level. And with how cheap it is, it doesn't fall into my reservations when recommending magic weapons that other magic weapons fall into. Because even the Toppius Chopper at 35 points, I like it. But if I'm getting tight on my magic items allowance, there's an easy switch out to still gain that AP -3. The Wallopers One Hit Wonder for 15 points. I've not got choppers as a Goblin. It's strength 10, so I can wound like steam tanks on a 2. And that strikes first. I really like it, and it's cheap enough to recommend all the time. Magic armor, you've got the Trollhide trousers, which are extremely common. They're 40 points and may be worn with other armor. They increase the armor value by 1 of the wearer, as well as give the wearer regeneration 5 special rule. So if you've got a Black Orc boss for 40 points, you can get a shield, the pig sticker, as well as Trollhide trousers to gain a 2-up save when on a Wyvern and give the wearer regeneration 5, which is really nothing to be sniffed at. It makes your Blender Lord much more survivable. Now, it can't be combined with the Ogre Blade, which is we all know the premier weapon for most characters that are just going character hunting. So I think there's some intentionality there, right? But what you can do is combine it with the Talisman of Protection to get a 3-up, 5-up, 5-up on your Wyvern Lord with a great weapon. And then even though you're striking last, you're getting less attacks, but it's going to be really hard for your opponent to kill you. The Armor of Mork, 30 points. It's a suit of heavy armor. In addition, the wearer has magic resistance 2. I would recommend this, but there's about to be a really, really good magic item that will stop magic affecting you in the key places in your army list where you want it. And that is the glowy green amulet for 35 points. The bearer in any unit they've joined, if you're the target of an enemy spell, you can, instead of making a dispel attempt, use the glowy green amulet. On a 2+, the spell is dispelled. On a 1, the amulet explodes and can't be used for the rest of the game. Wow, just completely shutting down negative debuffs on a unit for 35 points, I think is incredibly good. It's something that if I'm not using the troll hide trousers on a BSB, it's something that I would, because I tend to do BSBs as less of an output thing and more of a unit buff thing, because I know you can make them just as outputty as other sort of hero level characters, but I tend to view that as the place to put buff things for the unit. And the glowy green amulet, I think, is one of the better ones, and it will keep all the debuffs that you could want off your key units or your key unit. The Collar of Zorga for 20 points. Any enemy beasts of burden that direct its attack against the wearer of a Collar of Zorga suffer -1 to hit, and beasts of burden are chariots, cavalry, or any mounted character whose troop type is monster, or the mount of any character. Situational. It's only massively going to matter versus dragons, things like that, because I don't really care about a horse, especially as an orc. Maybe it matters a bit more as a goblin, but as an orc, when I'm toughness 5, the horse is still going to need a 5 to wound me after it's hit. So don't care too much. It does stop you in a 50 points magic item limit of taking the Trollhide Trousers. And Trollhide Trousers, I'm sort of referring back to them a few times within the last 3 entries. It's because they're one of the best magic items in the game, I think. Hardly a bad thing to say about them. And I just don't think the Collar of Zorg is... When flaming attack items, say like the Rune of the Forge for dwarfs, gives a 3-up ward to flaming attacks for 10 points. I think this is in that sort of category. It needs to be much less. It needs to be like 10 points for how situational it is. Next, onto Magic Standards, we've got the Big Red Raggedy Flag. A unit carrying this, the Big Red Raggedy Flag, has a +1 modifier to its weapon skill characteristic. In addition, you get an additional +1 combat result point. Really, really good. It's going to make you Black Orcs weapon skill. It's going to make Black Orcs weapon skill 5 all the time. That's the key place I'd say for it, because say on Boar Boys, which is the other obvious choice to put it, I would say, as like a primary destroyer of units and tough nut to crack, I actually think some of the other banners are better. +1 weapon skill, though, is always going to be useful. I don't think I can say anything bad about it, and I don't really think for 50 points there's any bad places to put it, except for, say, a Goblin unit. And even then, if you want a big survivable Goblin unit, extra weapon skill is going to help you with that, though it's just not the place that I'd be recommending putting it. The War Banner for 40 points, a unit carrying the War Banner extends maximum charge range by 3 and can apply a +D3 modifier. Now, obviously, it can apply to any unit. It's useful in most situations, especially when you want to get that additional charge range to make use of your choppers. However, this is the one that I was saying with Boar Boys I'd be tempted to put onto that unit, because it extends the charge range that little bit more. Potentially with the War Banner, I'd also be putting the Banner of Butchery for 35 points into, if I got my BSB into a unit. Having the War Banner or Banner of Butchery in part of your unit's magic banner allowance, they're cheap enough to, say, put on Boar Boys or put on Black Orc units to also gain that bonus. And the Banner of Butchery for 35 points, +1 strength during a turn in which you charge, just compounds all of the other benefits that you're getting as an Orc player on the charge. Really, really good. Not like +1 strength again, it's same as weapon skill. You can't really say anything bad about that. It tips your cavalry spears to be into the same realms as lances. So, by which I mean it's +2 strength, including the banner, -2 AP because you've got choppers. So your supposedly weak cavalry spears are performing just as good as everyone else's lances, which is one of the downsides of Orcs, kind of. The Guff's Windy Banner for 20 points. A unit carrying the Guff's Windy Banner may reroll any failed panic checks. All right, if you want a unit out on a limb that's going to potentially take panic, because it's a panic check and not a rally check, it is a bit more useful than, say, stuff that allows you to reroll rally checks. But I try and get veteran into places that are going to be out on a limb. Try and get stuff near your BSB if it's really going to matter that you fail panic checks. 20 points, it's definitely worth it just throwing onto a key unit. But if it's so out on a limb that it's not near something with Quell Impetuosity, half of the time you're going to be failing your Impetuous roll anyway, and just run off to charge something that you don't really want it to charge. Enchanted items, we've got the Big Boss Hat. For 50 points during the command subphase, a character wearing the Big Boss Hat that's not engaged in combat can make a leadership test. If it's passed, you gain the Unbreakable special rule until the end of your next turn. Really, really good. This is one of the things that you could put on a BSB or a 100-point level character along with the Trollhide Banner. And because you can do it in your command phase before you charge, you can then make the charge, be unbreakable, And in the situations where you don't just break through in a turn, maybe you even go into a harder unit that you know you just need to pin for a turn. It's really, really good. Really good for Goblin units with lower leadership that are going to have to grind out more combats rather than just get a lot stacked into a unit in one turn and just breaking that unit. But one of the better items one of the better items in the game. There's lots. I think the Orcs and Goblins have done really good in the magic items overall. Like all the magic standards are good pretty much. Even the reroll panic is so like I'm just looking. It's still good. I'm just looking at one that's worse than the 3 auto includes in the list. The big boss art really good. For 15 points, the Ed button art gives the wearer impact hits 1. The impact hits have an armor piercing characteristic of -2. Really good. And for 15 points, if you've got, say, a boss on Wyvern that has a talisman of protection, trollhide trousers, you can get Ed button at to gain armor piercing 2 impact hit when you charge in, and it's just an auto hit, strength 5, AP -2. Really, really good, especially for 15 points. It skips out the to hit roll being an impact hit. It's something that you want to be doing anyway, is charging. For your lower strength characters, like Goblins, I don't think it is as worth it. But there's still something to be said there for getting another AP -2 hit that's at an impact hit speed rather than at your initiative order. Fungus Wine for 10 points. This is Night Goblins only. During the command phase, if you're not engaged in combat, you can attempt to distribute fungus wine to the unit by making a leadership check. If passed until your next turn, this character and any unit they've joined are immune to psychology. It's both extremely common, and for 10 points, in a horde unit and a warband unit that most goblins are, you're going to have a reasonably high unit. You sort of preempt that leadership check. And for 10 points, it's worth just throwing in there. Though if you do fail that leadership check, obviously you've just wasted 10 points, but who cares? It's only 2 goblins when you've got loads of them in your list already. Arcane items, you've got the Glittering Whatnots for 40 points. If the bearer or their unit is the target of an enemy spell, then you use the Glittering Whatnots instead of making a Wizardly Dispel attempt. D6 roll of 1 to 3, they have no effect. On a 4+, the spell is reflected back upon the caster, and they become the target of the spell. The caster themselves may make a Wizardly Dispel attempt. A fairly fun item, obviously, if I'm really trying to shut down enemy magic. I know obviously trying to reflect the spell back, a bad spell back, is good, but the glowy green amulet for 5 points less, just 2+ to completely shut down the spell, being so much more reliable, I think is a better magic item. The Glittering Whatnots, it's like the frog to me. Is a less extreme version of the frog in the generic magic items list, where it seems to be a bit of fun that's thrown in there, and I like the spirit behind it. Don't think it's the greatest of magic items. Bugnob's Knobbly Staff for 35 points. Once per turn, the bearer may re-roll a casting roll. It is good for 35 points. Getting a re-roll to a spell is obviously good. You wait until you roll low or haven't cast a spell, re-roll it, and it can be taken by level 2s. Not that anyone's really taking any level 2s at the moment, to make them more useful and able to cast spells. Obviously, it's just as good for a level 4 when you've rolled low. Idol of Mork, 30 points. The bearer of the Idol of Mork increases their dispel range by 2. Additionally, once per turn, you can re-roll the dispel roll. A weirdly defensive item. I know the glowy green amulet and glittering whatnots are also defensive items, but surely Mork is a super aggressive deity that wants to be aggressive all the time. Though I suppose you've already got re-roll the casting roll. So it's a good item. Can't really say anything about increasing your dispel range, especially for 30 points and getting a re-roll on the dispel attempt from when you just completely fluff a roll. I like it. It's a solidly priced magic item. I think it's really good. So next, onto the remaining characters. We've got the Orc bosses, and for about 25 points less, you get basically the Black Orc stat line, -1 weapon skill, -1 leadership. And actually, those are two really big stats and characteristics for the operation of any war bosses, big bosses that you might have. Now, really, when you're going to be taking the Black Orc bosses, the Orc bosses, Jesus, is when you don't have enough points to get Black Orc units in your list to go through Du Bois rule, because obviously you need a Black Orc unit for every Black Orc, big boss and war boss. That said, they're still solid characters. 110 points for strength, toughness 5 and 4 attacks. Really like them. They are still better than Empire, Templar, Masters of the Templar in stat line. They've got Furious Charge still, choppers, ignore Goblin Panic, but they are impetuous. They get War, so you can add them into other units to gain, like even a 55-point big boss, to get War into a unit more often, to re-roll the to-hit rolls of 1 for a turn and extra combat res. And you also have Warband here. So in units that have Warband, you can benefit from your leadership. So although your characteristic is 8, if you are in, say, an Orc unit, even the big boss will take your leadership to 10. It also means that if you're on a Chariot, your model has the Warband special rule. It also means that obviously you can re-roll charge distances if you and your unit have Warband, which is really helpful, especially if you're looking for more long bomb charges by having the banner of an extra D3 and being in, say, like a Boar Boy unit. I think it's really good. For the upgrades, you can have additional hand weapons, great weapons, cavalry spears. As I said, I prefer the great weapon, especially on quite a survivable platform. Cavalry spears, there's something to be said for, though you're losing out on an AP value based on the great weapon. But it's here and there, it's obviously to taste. Sometimes it's obviously better to have that full initiative. You're going to be initiative 8 on a charge in the front into an enemy unit, which is really good. Can take a shield along with that cavalry spear, and along with heavy armor, you will gain armor value 4, goes to 3 if you've got Trollhide. And that you will be really survivable with. Even being on a 4 up, 5 up with Trollhide, heavy armor, and a great weapon is really good. You can instead of taking heavy armor, replace your light armor with Frenzy for 3 points, and you can take War Paint for 5 points for a 5 up ward. Separately, then you Trollhide trousers, so you could have Trollhide trousers, a 6 up, 6 up, 5 up for all of those, or even a Talisman of Protection instead of that. Is leaning into the frenzy that represents the savage orcs, which is a really cool theme, whether you want to be doing that on like an army-wide basis, especially when people know how to use light cavalry now to bait units out and make them just go on a merry chase. I don't know as much, but if you're in there, I've seen it used successfully when you've got a unit in the center of a line. So if a light cavalry unit wants to come and bait you, you're sort of hemmed in by your other units and can't charge off too far to the sides. Like, I have seen it work successfully like that. Otherwise, you can, I suppose, put Goblin Wolf Riders in skirmish formation in front of them to stop them being forced to charge off with Frenzy. Yeah, mounts-wise, Wyvern, just as good as it was on the Black Orc boss. Your Orc Boar Chariots have Warband, so you'd be re-rolling charge distances when you're mounted on as an Orc War Boss. I do think they're a fairly solid option, especially for having like your boss mounted on going to leadership range 18, though you obviously will be singly targetable and not be able to hide near units. Now, on the flip side of that, your Boar boys, I think, are really successful in the Orc list. Having a war boar that's strength 4 on the charge at AP -1, having counter charge, armored hide 1, so basically barding and getting your Orc war boss to a potential 2-up save along with troll hide trousers, I think is a really good option. For the war boss or big boss, it adds punch to the boar boys unit when they're being used as a shock cavalry unit and you want to just break through your enemy lines, and they're cheap. And I suppose I'm giving a rundown as if we don't all know what characters add to units, but I think we do. Orc Shamans, we've got 140 points and 65 points. We all know by now strength 4 shut down, level 4 shut down pretty much everyone else, so we probably don't need to go over whether or not you want to go level 4 versus level 2. There is something to be said for being on just a fast mount as a 65 point or 95 point level 2. But that requires much more effort than just knowing that you can cast all the time by being a level 4. Mob rule is a nice little special rule that if the character's joined a unit of Orcs with unit strength 10 or more, +1 to your casting roll, it does make the level 2s more viable because there's a lesser of a difference between your level 2 and their level 4 when you get +1. However, it's just as much of a benefit to a level 4 as it is to your level 2. So it's still hard to recommend a level 2 over a level 4. Now, Battle Magic and Elementalism are two very good laws, I would say, for the Orcs. Battle Magic, lower casting values, but Oaken Shield is really good, especially if you're going to be in a unit to make use of the mob rule, and then that unit will get a 5-up ward from Oaken Shield. Fireball is fairly solid. You've got Hammer Hand to be able to do additional hits in combat. Now, Elementalism, on the flip side of that, you've got Plague of Rust for -2 AP, and that stacks really nicely with your Chopper special rule, as well as just any, obviously, AP. Taking people down by -2 AP is absolutely savage. Earthen Ramparts is less of a use to you because you're probably going to want to be getting the charge with your Orcs all the time, and Earthen Ramparts does prevent you from getting the charge, though stopping your unit having to make a charge with Earthen Ramparts, say like a Shooty Boys unit, if you don't want them to engage, then I wouldn't care that much. Wind Blast is really good for a strength 5 D3+3 Wind Blast Magic Missile, which forces your opponent to give ground, so it can play with charge ranges quite a lot. So I do like the laws that they have got on Orc Shamans, though I probably favour a little bit Battle Magic, especially with the mob rule tying into Oaken Shield, because having a big unit that's got a 5-up ward is absolutely insane. The Law of Gork, which you've got as an Orc, has 2 spells in it, right? You've got Brain Burster, which is an assailment, casting value 10, which a single enemy model the caster is engaged within combat suffers a single strength 6 hit with multiple wounds D3, no armor or regen allowed. A really solid spell, actually, I think. The casting value is a little bit high, but if you were in the front rank of a unit as a level 4 shaman, so you're on casting value +5, you need to average a 5 to cast it, and that is quite hard to dispel at that level. So I actually do quite like Brain Burster for just picking on an enemy character that you just don't want to see anymore. The Gaze of Gork, Magic Missile, casting value 9, range 5d6, draw a straight line 5d6 in length, and anyone that falls into that line suffers a strength 5 AP -3 hit. Now, there's definitely something to be said for that. It's something, if you're not going to be inside an Orc unit, I think is going to be better, because with an Orc unit, a lot of the time you're going to be wanting to march and therefore can't cast a Magic Missile. But say you've got an Orc Shaman on a boar, riding around on a boar, getting the flanks and just absolutely vaporizing down that 5d6 line, I think is a really strong spell at the strength 5 AP -3. So again, more really good AP value for the Orcs and Goblins list. Next up, we come to the Goblin units, and sort of within this, you've got two concurrent sections, right? You've got the Goblin section and the Night Goblin section. So they're very, very similar in stat line, except obviously one leadership less for the Night Goblins, one leadership obviously more for the Goblins. Goblins, however, obviously don't hate dwarfs. If you were interested in that kind of thing, they'll both fear elves. How do you want to set up your army? I think is more going to be the choice in this. Night Goblins overall at the moment, with Fanatics being absolutely savage, are really good, though if you want to add some punch to a Wolf Rider or Spider Rider unit, a Forest Spider Rider unit, the Goblin bosses are obviously the way to go. And at 35 points for a Goblin big boss, which has got 3 attacks, 15 points for the magic weapon, which strikes first at strength 10 AP -3, is a really nasty surprise to be found in a mounted Goblin unit. Obviously, they both got impetuous. I wouldn't go too far into trying to keep your Goblin bosses and big bosses alive, to be honest, because I think you just want to keep them cheap and just use them to hit things a bit better than your Goblins, not get too invested in their survival, because I don't think they are that survivable unless you've got Black Orcs controlling their movement, in which case they're obviously but they've got a reasonable stat line. It's the same as, say, the Empire's stat line for their generals of the Empire. They're just lesser leadership on both counts. Now, for ridden monsters, you can get a giant wolf or a giant spider for the normal orc boss, which is movement 9 for the giant wolf, which is really, really good. You get fire and flee, fast cavalry, chariot runners, which is a really useful special rule for having chariots charge through you, stopping the impetuosity of the chariot before you then unleash it on people through the chariot runner wolves. And he's really good for nipping round enemy units. You can pair up, say, a Goblin Wolf Rider unit with a Black Orc on Wyvern to quell that impetuosity and deliver a fairly sizable threat to your enemy's backline, going 18 inches a turn, which is really, really nice. Giant spiders, giving you +1 wound with initiative 4 and 3 attacks, is obviously more onto the monstrous cavalry analog creature because it's giving you additional wounds. It's got 3 attacks at strength 4, which are also poisoned. Armored hide 1, so it's increasing your armor save by 1, though you will still only reach, say, like a 4-up save if you've got light armor and shield with that. Obviously, you can increase that with troll hide trousers if you're really worried about keeping your goblin alive. But I don't know how much I would invest in magic items into something that's only 65 points to keep alive a 65-point goblin. Giant cave squig, if you're a night goblin, +1 wound, 3 attacks. It's 3d6 random move and his monstrous cavalry, so can still hide around units. I do like it with its AP -1, armor bane 1, and killing blow access. And when you've got 3 attacks and you start stacking this up in multiple places, having them around and joining squig units, things like that, maybe even into goblin units just hung off the side, I actually really like. And although you've got loner, you can hide near units. I do really like it as a mount, though obviously the random move can be a bit of a downside, but also it can be 18-inch move this turn. So Goblin Shamans, as well as Night Goblin Shamans, have the same differences as Goblin bosses and Night Goblin big bosses and Night Goblin bosses, being that the Goblin is an extra leadership but doesn't have hatred dwarfs. Again, you've got Elementalism magic on the Goblin Shaman, and you've got Illusion magic on the Night Goblin Shaman. So that's a bit of a difference there. You've got the Elementalism, again, is just like Wind Blast. Earthen Ramparts, which you can sort of appreciate a bit more in a Goblin list, in that you might not always want to be charging. You might want to be using a load of Goblin artillery to do a bit more damage, and just to keep certain units safe, to just anchor places a bit more rather than charging in knowing that you'll lose the combat because it's Goblins. My point being that if you've got a big Goblin unit, you might just want to get it in the way of an enemy unit, because if you charge in your turn, it's just an extra turn for your enemy to kill you. So I do think Goblins get a bit more usage out of Earthen Ramparts than, say, Orcs do, where they want to be charging all the time. Same arguments for leadership, for level 4s versus level 3s and 1s, except you don't get the mob rule that Orc Shamans do for +1 casting. However, they are absolutely dirt cheap on the flip side of that. Night Goblin Shamans with their illusion magic. Illusion magic can be one of the better magic laws in the game, with Glittering Robe giving -1 to hit, Mind Razor being a fairly solid magic missile because it's got AP -3, even though it does have a low number of hit rolls. I suppose it's the same as Wind Blasting Elementalism. Column of Crystalline Column, preventing charges done by your opponent if you can manage to keep your spell in the remains in play, is really useful for just stopping you Goblins getting charged and just general fuckery with the enemy army. Spectral Doppelganger, I don't think you really want to be speccing into, say, like an Ogre Blade with your Goblin units, but if you swing that way, go for it, man. A Miasmic Mirage for debuffing the movement value of enemy units so that you actually won't get charged as often. Again, it's just delaying tactics. I think you sort of want to be playing with Goblins until you're really nasty units like Squig units, Giant Squigs, the Beasts, Trolls, and your artillery can do some work. So both have access to the Law of Mark. Mark's Curse, being a hex, which is 18-inch range with a low casting value of 8, remains in play. The target enemy unit must reroll any armor saves of a natural 6, so sort of the opposite of the Dwarf Gromril armor rule. Fairly nice, but with a low casting value, you're going to have to successfully use it in your turn before your enemy can just dispel it in their command phase because of the low casting value of 8, meaning that even if I just fated dispel it in my command phase, I've got like a 50-50 chance of dispelling it. Itchy Nuisance is a hex, casting value 9, range 15. Until the start of your next turn subphase, the target enemy unit suffers -D3 to its toughness and initiative to a minimum of 1. Now, this is one of the best spells in the game, I would say. -D3 to toughness can take so many things to toughness 1. Like, I only need to roll an average roll to take a human to toughness 1, and I can also do it with a better than average roll to Chaos Warrior units, Orc units, things like that, to really level the playing field for Goblins to just stab with their strength 3 and wound you on a 2. Yeah, really, really good. I'd definitely be trading out stuff for the Itchy Nuisance most of the time, no matter what law I was taking. I think it's just one of the best spells in the game. So I've sort of glossed over taking Goblin Shamans on Anorak Spiders, and that's something I personally don't like to see casters really get into combat. Obviously, I see it boosts the fighting score of your Goblin. However, keeping that as 2 separate rolls, I think there's definitely something to be said for, because it doesn't cost any more points to have the 2 separately. The only time that I think it really conflicts is if you're really going to be maxing out your rare slots and wanting to get more Anorak Spiders in, or more, like another Giant or Giant Mangler Squigs or what have you into the list. Now, that's something that we can cover as we go along in the sort of like Beasts section. And with that, we'll get onto the actual Infantry section of the list. So the first unit we come to is the Black Orc Mob. For 12 points, even with +1 point for a shield, 13 points. Having full plate, getting to a 3-up save on Black Orcs, I think is absolutely savage. The first thing to point out is they're full plated. They've got Weapon Skill 4, Strength Toughness 4, and Leadership 8, along with Ignoring All Sources of Panic. They are an absolutely brilliant unit, one of the best heavy infantry units in the game, especially for the points being between 12 and 15 points a model, depending on what upgrades you give them. They've got the ability to take additional hand weapons, which will benefit from the Chopper special rule. So it can be getting, along with Furious Charge, up to 3 attacks each on the charge. You can take great weapons with Furious Charge, 2 attacks each on the charge, along with the big red banner to give them weapon skill 5, I think is the better places to put it, right? What is to be said for this unit? They are really, really good, absolute terrors of the game at the moment, at least in the infantry sections. One unit in the army can have Stubborn and Veteran, which at 2 points a model, I think I'd be giving at least one unit, both of them. Like the Veteran will allow... So at 1 point a model against Stubborn, I'd definitely be doing that for at least one unit, and then have that where my big boss is at isn't. So I don't need the Unbreakable and the big boss is at on one unit, have it in the other place. Veteran, because you're already ignoring panic, is less worthwhile, because Veteran doesn't allow you to reroll break, you're ignoring panic anyway. Other leadership tests are less common, but it can be nice if you're facing lots of terror causers, things like that in your local meta. Obviously, you've got Choppers, Close Order, the Boys, so you're going to have a 1-for-1 parity with Black Orc, Big Bosses and War Bosses, though I don't see that as much of a problem, unless you want to take more than one unit of Black Orc Bosses, Big Bosses, whatever. Furious Charge, solid special rules, gain additional +1 attack on the charge. Motley Crew is actually a really good special rule, because it allows you to mix and match weapons in the unit. So if you've got a 7-wide front rank, you can have 4 with great weapons and then 3 with shields, and when incoming attacks come in, you take them on the shielded 3-ups before you start taking them on the 4-up great weapons or additional hand weapons. My sort of feeling with Black Orcs, I know, and do you know what, I'm going to say something that will just immediately be wrong. I obviously like great weapons. You hear me say it over and over again, because I am scared of just getting locked in combat with a high armor value unit. Obviously, there's an argument for additional hand weapons. I definitely have a few shields in the unit, maybe a third, to just keep them going in that front rank. But yeah, what to say, it's a really, really good unit. The Quell Impetuosity is absolutely core for the army's operation. And at 12 points a model are super cheap for what they do. There is even some sort of argument for having units of 5, so it's only 60 points. And if you want multiple instances of Quell Impetuosity, unit strength of 5 to just like run around your backlines, keeping the rest of your army performing how you want it to perform, is definitely a tactic. Though it's sort of getting away with why you would choose to play Orcs and Goblins, right? Because it needs that bit of randomness. It needs that bit of randomness. Next, Orc mobs. So these are like obviously the closest analog to Black Orcs in parity. You've got 5 points a model, so less than half the cost. You've got 1 weapon skill less, 1 strength less, though you've still got toughness 4. You've got leadership of 6, 7 on the sergeant or the champion, and you've got warband, so that's actually going to go to 9 when you've got the warband rank bonuses added to your leadership. So actually is a really brave unit. If you add in an Orc war boss, which is leadership 8, you're going to go to leadership 10, which is the highest level you can get in the army, because obviously a Black Orc boss doesn't have warband, so can't add the rank bonus to the Black Orc boss's leadership. But then you've not got the Quell Impetuosity or a stronger fighter on the front rank, whereas you might even want to do both, right? You can take war bows for free, additional hand weapons for 1 point a model, thrusting spears for 1 point a model, throwing spears 1 point a model. I actually think this is one of my favourite places to put throwing spears, like a big unit of Orc boys that can be fairly cheap. You've got light armour, throwing spears for 6 points a model, shields for 7 points a model, and you can get tons and tons of boys for fairly cheap. You can have the big and special rule, 0-1 unit in the army for 2 points a model, which will give you that +1 strength that makes you on a level with Black Orcs. So obviously your weapon skill is still lower, but it makes a real strong unit. You can also replace Close Order with Skirmishers for free, which is sort of insane that you can have a big unit of boys. Obviously, you're forgoing the Warband special rules bonuses to your leadership if you do that, but with Warbows being free, you can have this fairly good unit in combat that's tough skirmishers, that can have the 360 arcs, and even though you're going to be maybe charging off when you don't want to, it can be a fairly good unit in combat just because you've got the Choppers special rule. Thrusting spears, it doesn't lean into your aggressive nature of an orc as much as throwing spears, which is why I'd go with the throwing spears. Additional hand weapons, 1 point a model, are actually quite good, getting 2 attacks each. I like it. Also going to benefit from the Choppers special rule, and getting a ton of orcs charging, getting 14 attacks from a 7-wide front row, 15 with a champion, is definitely nothing to sniff at, especially when you've got the big and special rule. You can be upgraded. You can replace your light armor with Frenzy to be a Savage Orc boy for 1 point a model, and purchase a Magic Standard up to 50 points as a separate bullet point to the Frenzy. So you can do both or one of them in that 0-1 unit per army. 50 points gets you access to all of the good Orcs and Goblins standards. You've got a 25-point Magic Standard limit anyway. On a frenzied unit of Savage Orcs, you can take Big Stabbers for impact hits D3, which can be really, really good. Like with a 7-wide front rank, averaging 14 impact hits, and then you can have additional hand weapons for 1 point a model. And at a very cheap cost of 5 points a unit, you're just obviously going to run into the frenzied dilemma of you could just get baited all game. Now, do I think this is a super infantry edition? Not particularly. I do think you can make infantry work well. And I think orcs are cheap enough to justify big blocks of infantry. Like for that 5 points, you're the same level as a Bretonian peasant with an additional toughness and an additional weapon skill. And it's not much more in upgrades to get a really good platform. And you're also getting the choppers, close order. You've got the warband. Yeah, so I really like it as an infantry unit. I think Black Orcs are better with their full plate, even for the additional price. And also because of that Quell Impetuosity. But if you want a themed list of a big orc war, orc mobs, I think are still definitely in the running because they're so cheap. Goblin mobs, for 3 points a model, you get weapon skill 2, strength toughness 3, leadership 5 with horde and warband. So you can get up to leadership 9 because the boss is leadership 6. It's a good unit. It's a bit weird that you have to pay a point to replace their shield with a bow when orcs get an upgrade to a bow for free. You can take light armor for 1 point a model. So for 5 points, which is the same price as an orc with light armor, you're getting a goblin with light armor and shield, which I don't think is as good of a trade. If you want to do goblins, you're almost increasing the cost of each goblin by 100%. What, like 70% of the goblin price to give it a light armor and a thrusting spear or a bow. There's something to be said for the bow, but I keep them as cheap as possible. Other than that, you just know they're going to die, and just allow them to be a massive tar pit. Definitely a quantity has a quality all of its own style unit that I think needs to be lent into rather than trying to make up for shortcomings by buying armor for them and things like that. They've not got the levy special rules, so you're going to have to be careful with where you put standard bearers in the army rather than giving away too many standards. Though obviously if you've got real big units, like the traditional sort of 50, 80 goblin units members in a unit, you're not going to get doubled out very easily. It's just you've got to have your battle standard around to keep them fighting, especially if someone pulls a first charge on you. Maybe even a few units of 10 to just range in front of your biggest mobs, so that first charge is soaked up by those small units of 10, and then you have some big units behind them. 0 to 1 per 1,000 can replace close order with skirmishers for free. Magic standards of 50 points. Fairly good, especially, razor standards. And I do like thrusting spears in big units. I suppose razor standard can be piled on, because although you've got to be a bit careful of overcosting onto these goblins, a magic standard that affects the entire unit for a set price, I think is a good investment, so long as you're taking a big enough unit. You can include 0 to 3 nasty skulkers for 10 points each. And nasty skulkers are weapon skill 4, strength toughness 3, 2 attacks each with a hand weapon and light armor. They have armor bane 2, horde, so they don't disrupt the horde nature of the goblin unit. They've got strikes first, skulking menace. So what does the skulking menace do? Basically, you don't deploy them onto the field, but at step 1.1 of the fight phase, you can position a nasty skulker as you would a character that has joined a unit. So that's usually round the side of your opponent's unit or displacing one of your models. If the concealing unit is destroyed or flees the battlefield before the nasty skulkers are revealed, they're removed as casualties. For 10 points, getting that weapon skill 4, strikes first, they're still puny goblins, but you've not got much to boost the killing power of your goblin units. So at Armor Bane 2, having 3 of them for 30 points, it's not a terrible investment. But when you think you can get 10 goblins for the price of 3 nasty skulkers, you might just want more goblins and let your other units perform like the workhorse roles of killing the enemy. Night Goblin units, leadership 4 and 5, are the same stat line as normal goblins. They're 3 points a model, so not actually cheaper because they're lower leadership, but because you can include netters and fanatics in that unit, they actually operate, I think, much better than a normal goblin unit, and I don't think any of us are going to argue against how good fanatics are currently. Netters, during step 1.1, you can attempt to entangle one enemy unit it is engaged with. On roll a d6, on a roll of 1, it's become entangled itself. On a 2 plus, the enemy unit is entangled. Till the end of the combat phase, suffer -1 to its strength, to a minimum of 1. Nice to combine with Itchy Nuisance. It's going to help you against very mid or low quality troops that are strength 3 normally anyway. It's against lances of something like Chaos Knight, good luck, he's not helping you at all. But at 20 points a unit, I don't think it's the most competitive choice, but it's certainly a fluffy one and situationally useful for keeping your unit strength up so you don't get double plus wand. Now, the real auto include of the unit entry is Fanatics. So Fanatics are 25 points. You can have up to 3 of them. Thank God it's not more than that for all of us non-Orcs and Goblin players. They're strength 5, immune to psychology, and release the Fanatic special rule. Basically, Fanatics aren't deployed on the battlefield at the start of the game. They're kept hidden within a unit in the same way like, say, nasty skulkers are. And any command phase with no stipulations, so you can be running away when your Fanatics get released. You can throw your Fanatics out. They're placed within 3 inches of the concealing unit. The first turn, you can declare what direction you're going to be going in. In further turns, it's random, and you move them 2d6 in whatever direction that happens to be. If you come in contact with a unit, you pop out the other side of that unit, and you do d6 strength 5, AP -3 hits to the unit. Fanatics nowadays can't be shot at, they can't be charged. I suppose they can be accidentally hit by, say, like a column of flame, a magical vortex. If they go into terrain, they just die. So there are the two ways to kill them there, but other than that, they're going to be spinning around for the rest of the game until they hit terrain or get vortexed. Now, in further turns, they can do damage to your own units, but with how cheap goblins are, you're not too worried about the fanatics doing damage to your units. The main thing I think about fanatics this edition is that rather than being auto-released, you choose and it's in any command phase. So in a phase where your opponent you know is going to charge you, your Night Goblin unit, you can throw the fanatics in front of your unit and just be like, charge through that. It's going to be 3d6, strength 5, -3 hits to your unit. And it can absolutely wreck units. And for 25 points of fanatic, it's one of the reasons your Night Goblin units are limited to 0 to 3 in the tournament packs. And I suppose all units are limited to 0 to 3, but there's a good argument for Night Goblins being one of the reasons for that. If there was another way to get rid of them, like shooting at them, I could see them being less frustrating. But there isn't anymore, and they are just very, very good. One of the better things in the game, I think, at the moment, because there isn't many ways to deal with them other than just relying on them running into each other, running into terrain, things like that. Now, one of the sort of weird nuances of the old world at the moment is that even if your Night Goblin unit gets destroyed, if your fanatics have been released and they're still spinning about, your opponent won't get points for that unit other than, say, killing the unit to below 25% strength, because members of the unit are still around. So if you've got a big expensive Night Goblin unit, throw out your fanatics, your opponent can kill that unit and you don't care as much so long as the last fanatic doesn't die, which can be a real good way, frustrating way of like sort of saving points and denying points to your opponent when normally it would be a goblin unit that just ends up rolling over. Finally on the actual like walking about infantry side, we've got snotling mobs, and these are represented by swarms that are 35 points each for 6 wounds of strength toughness 2, leadership 4, 5 attacks, but unbreakable and skirmishers. What to say about these? They've got Vanguard, immune to psych. I've not seen loads of snotlings about, but being able to take 2+ snotlings with no upper limit and being only 35 points per snotling mob, they're definitely worthwhile. I think it may be like an availability of models thing, because just anchoring a flank by having a bunch of unbreakable 9 or 6 wound skirmishers on there is just incredibly effective. I mean, Dwarf Slayers are like 13 points plus a model. Flagellants are 13 points a model for their unbreakable with only 1 wound each. This is 6 wounds for 35 points. Although you've not got any real damage output, it's just an absolute, you can swamp something and just not care about it for the rest of the game and just deal with things that way. Hiding your artillery train with snotling mobs is a definite valid tactic for just, I mean, even a dragon, if you just swamp a dragon with snotling mobs, it can't really do much if you've got a load of swarms of snotlings and only 40 by 40 millimeter bases. They're really easy to fit in and around your battle line. One of an anti-dragon strategy is to just have a bunch of snotling mobs, and they actually fulfill your core slot as well. So it's not even you're taking things from special or rare to get these unbreakable swarms. And if a dragon comes round, it's just like, oh, right, well, I've paid 200 points and that's been 36 wounds worth of snotlings. Good luck with that for 3 turns, 4 turns, because I'm going absolutely nowhere. So, yeah, real good shout out to them. Although you're not killing the dragon, you're neutering its effectiveness. And that goes for other elite units with low numbers of attacks. Knight units, which only have 1 attacker model, are just absolutely decimated by just being grounded ground out by swarms across a game where they won't kill their points back. So next we go on to sort of a beast unit, which is, although it's infantry, it's a Night Goblins Squig Herd. So at 3 points a model for the Squig Herders, which are just Night Goblins, 10 points a model for the Cave Squigs, and you've got to have at least 1 Squig Herder and 5+ Squigs per unit. And you've got to have at least 1 Squig Herder for every 5 Cave Squigs. Now, there's a couple of thoughts on the way to run these, which are very small units that you just throw forwards, and then if they ever go wild, which is if you lose a round of combat, if you break and flee from combat, so including for Vigo, any unit within 2d6 suffers d3 strength 5 hits each, with an AP of -1. For each additional 5 squigs in the herd, apply a +1 modifier to the d3. So actually, if you're in a Goblins, you don't care too much. It's not that many hits for you because your units are so low points value and high unit strength, but it can hurt for your opponent. So you can just take small units, charge them forwards. If you lose a squig, they no longer, and go below 5, they no longer do the squigs go wild rule. So that's one way to run them. Alternatively, it's maybe worth thinking about having, say, like 7, 8 squigs, so that you get a lot of attacks and then a ton of Night Goblins behind them to utilize the Warband rule, so that then you get a higher leadership of 6, as well as having a 2 rank bonus to be able to not break as often. And if you do lose a round of combat, yes, you've lost 7 squigs and d3 dudes from each unit of Night Goblins surrounding you, but so is your enemy, and it's not that many points for you. Even if the maximum of 3 Goblins die from each of your units, it's only 9 points a unit to sacrifice. I mean, if your opponent loses a knight from the same death of the squigs, you've pretty much evened out, and it's fine. So it seems like a really harsh rule, but actually I think the downside isn't as huge as what you would initially expect from it. If you're not going with a big unit, I definitely consider skirmishers, just to allow you to fight off fast cavalry that might try and flank you. Just having skirmish in a unit that's not going to benefit from the Warband special rule anyway, because you're only having 1 or 2 squig herders, just allows you a bit more freedom and the 360 charge out, which is really good. Now, on the actual damage output of the unit at strength 5 and 2 attacks, squigs are actually really good. They've got -1 AP as well as Armor Bane 1, and for only 53 points minimum per unit, they're definitely a spammable unit that is high damage output for the drawbacks that there is, such as squigs go wild. Definitely a good unit. I like it. 2 ways to run it. Big unit ranked up and minimize the effect of squigs go wild, and go a lot of squig herders so that you just get the rank bonus, as well as a front rank of squigs, maybe a couple more, so that you've still got the front rank after a couple of casualties. Either that or lots of disposable units that you can just go forwards, do some damage, and I don't care if you die. The final infantry we've got is the troll mob, and these are the monstrous infantry of the list. And there's 3 types of trolls: common trolls, river trolls, and stone trolls. And they're all between 41 and 50 points in the unit. They're all between 41 points for a common troll to 49 points for a river troll per model. They've all basically got weapon skill 3, strength 5, toughness 4. There's 3 wounds on the stone troll and common troll, and 4 wounds on the river troll because it's a fatty. You've got 3 attacks each. Your stone troll has leadership 5, and the other 2 have leadership 4. And they have slightly different special rules depending on which one they are. You've got Armor Bane 1 on all of them, Close Order on all, Flammable and Regeneration 5 on all. Now the differences in actual special rules comes in with Magic Resistance 1 as well as Armored Hide on the Stone Troll, giving you a 5-up save rather than a 6-up for the other trolls because of their cast hides. They all have fear and all have stupidity, meaning that low leadership of 4 and 5 is actually a bit of a killer. Now, I think the best way to sort of use them is just to, yes, I'm going to be stupid, but I still get to move forwards a random amount if I become stupid. Deploy them in a way that you can just trundle them forwards up to a certain amount every turn, and not ever have to actually wheel with them. Do I think they're the most competitive choice in the Orcs and Goblins tribes list? No, because of the lack of maneuverability about them. I think the Stone Trolls are probably slightly better because they're leadership 5 and the reliability of a unit to be able to perform functions that I require of it is quite high on my list of whether a unit's good or not. Obviously, there's something to be said for more wounds within the River Troll unit. You can take additional hand weapons for 3 points a model, great weapons for 4 points a model. Being multiple wound models, I really like great weapons. I really like great weapons. Who knew? 4 points a model, that's fine, especially with the regeneration 5 built in. You get an additional attack, which is Troll Vomit, which is an additional attack that strikes last at AP -2, strength 3. So a good AP value. And trolls are actually a good source of AP value within the list. Just very much let down by the fact that they're stupid. Bring on the Arcane Journal list, right? We'll get to that into the review, but as it is, they're not the most competitive choice in the tribes list because they are low leadership and stupid. So next on, we get onto Orc Boar Boys, the first of the cavalry entries in the list. And for 15 points a model at a toughness 4, you are strength 3, weapon skill 3. You've got leadership 7, though you've got warband, so that can go to 8 or 9 if you've got a war boss in there. The war boars are actually quite a good provision of strength 4 and AP -1 in the unit on the charge because of their tusk or charge. You've got armored hide along with light armor for a 5-up save base, shields for a 4-up. You can change that for heavy armor for 1 point a model, which I definitely do, to go to a 3-up save. Cavalry spears plus 1 point a model to get the effectively lances, but in AP value on the charge, definitely worth it, I think, because you want to maximize the shock value or shock cavalry value of these Orc Boar Boys. They're a real good hitter for the list. Now, I would also say you want to upgrade the 0-1. If you've got a unit, I would definitely say you want to upgrade it with the bigger than special rule. 2 points a model to gain you +1 strength, making you strength 5 with your cavalry spears on the charge. Just so much better, as well as getting that Armor Bane 1 is really, really good and sort of vital for the usage that you're going to see out of Boar Boys. I don't think you're going to see many, like I suppose you could see smaller units of like 5 and stuff for flanking units, things to just throw into things. But the most common way I see people run Boar Boys is a large unit with everything stacked into it to make that charge matter and break through the enemy. Because I think you have sort of your more grindy units elsewhere. You've got strong heavy infantry. You've got strong medium infantry in the form of orcs. Furious charge is a brilliant rule for him, for giving 2 attacks on the charge. So everything is weighted towards you just breaking through on the charge and doing your opponent in. And I think they're an excellent unit for that. Chris Vecht, who has been on playing Iron Hands, but I've not yet dragged him on to play the Old World, has absolutely schooled me with Orc Boar Boys over and over again. One thing I would not recommend is going the Frenzy route, because when he has put the Frenzy special rule on the unit, because of their long charge range, it makes them very easy to bait and pull off into the middle of nowhere when they can be quite expensive. Now, this is where I'd said you maybe want the War Banner for the additional range of charge. Obviously not if you want Frenzy special rule, but I think it's worthwhile for that extra long bomb charge, because having a cavalry unit, to just have a cavalry unit in waiting, it forms this standoff game. Even if the rest of your army is on foot, having one cavalry unit that can keep opposing cavalry at bay, and that is heightened in threat value by having additional charge over your opponent. It means that if they come forwards, you can charge them, so they've got to keep back, and that makes your boys' units a bit safer. And the onus is then on your opponent to outmaneuver you, rather than you having to outmaneuver your opponent to get into position. Next, we've got the Goblin Spider Rider and Goblin Wolf Rider mobs. Now, they've obviously got different special rules and uses, but I say different special rules and uses, different special rules. They are slightly different. Spider Riders is a goblin on top of a spider, which is movement 7, but you've got a high initiative, poisoned attacks, move through cover. You've got the standard impetuous, you've got cavalry spears for a point of model, short bows for a point of model, light armor for a point of model. On the flip side of that, Wolf Riders are 2 points less expensive. The giant wolves are movement 9 rather than movement 7. They're less initiative, but the weapon skill strength is the same. It comes down to taste, I think. The entire unit of Wolf Riders can take cavalry spears for free or replace shields with short bows for free. Yeah, it comes down to taste and what you want in your list, what you want your list to be themed as. Spider Riders can definitely take down the higher toughness units by just throwing in a bunch of spiders and hoping for poisoned attacks, keeping them cheap, say like 7, where it's only going to cost you like sort of 74 points for that, or so around there. Throw them in. Wolf Riders, you want to be utilising your speed, as well as having 0 to 1 per unit per 1,000, having Feigned Flight, Reserve Move, and a Magic Standard worth 50 points. Not a massive fan of the Magic Standard here, because in both the Spider Rider unit as well as the Wolf Rider units, both of which can take Magic Standards, you've got low model count, so the per model value of that standard is quite high compared to, say, a Razor Standard on a normal Goblin unit, where the per model cost split across all of the models in the normal Goblin unit is very low. Feigned Flight, to be able to regroup after you fire and flee, I think is definitely worthwhile on the Goblin Wolf Riders. It mitigates your low leadership, lets you get away with being in skirmish formation a bit more, though obviously your impetuous special rule is quite annoying when you're in skirmish formation. Reserve Move is very useful for a pointer model, meaning that especially if you've got dominance in shooting, or you've got a location where your opponent has a weak unit that you can move your Wolf Riders up to with their movement of 9, you can shoot that weak unit out of existence, and then using the Reserve Move special rule at the end of the shooting phase, you move through the created gap, is a very, very powerful special rule. Now, if you can control Impetuous somehow, I've had it suggested to me by Ian, who did the Dwarf review with me, that utilising a Goblin Shaman on a Wolf with a Reserve Move, because the FAQ, just the majority of units in the majority of models in the unit have to have the Reserve Move special rule to utilise it. You can move in and out of various dispel ranges and things like that to snipe away at your opponent with spells. Now, this is something that I'd slightly just prefer personally to not have Impetuous on the Shaman at all, because Shamans don't come with Impetuous. You're sort of giving it Impetuous by being in a Wolf Rider unit. But there is definitely something to be said for that if you can mitigate the downsides of Impetuous to pop in and out and sort of play like Goblin Dar, as in like Tau Eldar style tactics with the Goblin Wolf Rider mobs and the Reserve Move special rule. How do I picture, whenever I set up Goblin Wolf Riders, because I've done it for my Chaos a bit, to have like sort of step goblins like as allies in my Chaos, and with a unit strength of 5 at 10 points a model, 50 points, you can actually get quite a lot, and not a big scary unit, but mitigate the Impetuous a little bit by having a big unit of Goblin Wolf Riders that utilises Warband as well as their extra rank. And there is a little bit to be said for just being able to barrel through opposing light cavalry. So if you were deployed quite far out on the flank, and this goes for Spider Riders as well, if you deploy far out on the flank, you can usually overwhelm certain units and so not care about Impetuous forcing you to charge, and therefore get a bit behind the enemy, and with good manoeuvring, have a critical turn charge. Doesn't always obviously work out, but that's part of why Orcs and Goblins are so cheap, because half of the time you're going to be charging something that you really didn't want to charge. The next cavalry unit is a Night Goblin Squig Hopper. So for 12 points, you get a 3d6 random movement squig, which is the same as the Squig Herder, but with more random movement in the 3d6. So you can just like bomb forwards a lot. It's got the same damage output really as a Squig Herd, in that your Night Goblin on top is going to be fairly useless, whereas the Squig is going to be what's doing the damage, with Strength 5, 2 attacks, and Armor Bane 1 AP -1. The upside to a Squig Hopper mob, rather than a Squig Herder mob, is that your Squigs don't go insane when you fall back in good order or just fall back at all. They're kept under control. So the output is good, the price per model is good. I wouldn't expect absolutely brilliant things from them because they are very cheap, but Strength 5 AP -1 with 2 attacks is definitely nothing to be sniffed at. Cavalry Spears, I definitely give the Riders Cavalry Spears for that AP -1 as well, though you're still not going to be as good as the actual Squig you're riding on, but you win some, you lose some. Light armor I wouldn't bother with because you can't take shields, so you're only going to be a 6-up save. And I really don't rate the 6-up save. Now, finally, the last benefit that you get over a Squig Herd is the impact hits 1 on the Squig Hopper. So it's Strength 5 impact hit, so you're effectively 3 attacks on the charge, one of which is auto-hitting, though obviously you're not going to have AP on that impact hit. So it can do a fair amount of damage. It's definitely going to wipe out with 5 Squig Hoppers an opposing light cavalry unit. They are more reliable than Goblin Wolf Riders and Spider Riders because you don't have Impetuous. You have the random movement special rule instead, so he's weirdly more reliable, but it's obviously down to theme, whether you like Goblin Squig Hopper mobs. And that's sort of throughout the list. Like all of the things that we're looking at, there are good things, there are bad things, but one of the key things of Orcs and Goblins have always been taking things to your own theme and making it work. And I think there's enough good things to each segment of the list to make each viable and to also make a combined army very powerful. So now we get into the more War Machine-esque units. First, we have Orc Boar Chariots. Now, Orc Boar Chariots, heavy chariot type, so D6 + 1 impact hits with the -2 AP for the scythed wheels. You've got Orcs on top, which have got cavalry spears that, on the charge, along with the choppers rule, will be Strength 4, AP -2. So actually really effective as chariots go. The War Boars, having Tusk or Charge, add more Strength 4, AP -1 damage output. It's a good source of first charge in an Orc army or Orcs and Goblins army, along with having Close Order being unit Strength 5, and that can stack quite nicely across chariots that you may have. Warband allowing you to reroll charge distances, even if you put an Orc War Boss or Big Boss on there. And I think it's actually a really effective place to put a character, as well as having chariots on their own. At only 90 points each for toughness 5 and 4 wounds, it's a very cheap chariot to be able to run. 5 points for an additional Orc crew member. That's another attack at Strength 4, AP -2. So for only 5 points, that's actually a really effective way of running the chariot with an additional 3rd Orc crew member. I like the Orc chariot. Chariots in this edition of the game being able to march, as well as having first charge, are really powerful. Stacking close order bonuses, really good. And the Orc Boar Chariots, no exception to that, I don't think, in the heavy chariot category. Goblin Wolf Chariots being movement 9, 53 points a model, and light chariots. They can come in units of 1 to 5. I actually really like them. 150 points for 3 chariots, which isn't too wide of a frontage, like 150 wide frontage, and being able to march 18 is really, really good. Now, for 150 points, you're looking at the cost of a lot of light cavalry units. And that's the level that I think you should be going after with the Wolf Rider Chariots, like sort of a one-on-one combat. And you should be able to get the charge most of the time, having a high movement of 9, as well as Warband allowing you to re-roll your charge distances. Your impact hits being only D3+1 aren't the most effective. So you want to be taking out light cavalry units. I've had a unit of 6 Bretonnian Knights run off Chris's Goblin Wolf Chariots before, so that's the sort of cap level that I don't think they can deal with much more than a unit of light cavalry, some light skirmishers, and then I think they're just very good at running into the side of units after having flanked the enemy force. I don't think they will be taking out heavy cavalry units effectively, so you might want to avoid that, or even just tie up that heavy cavalry unit. At 100 points for 2 of them, you can do a bit of back damage and be expendable, taking out a chunk of heavy cavalry units or just running into lightly armored units. Having a goblin big boss on there, I think, is again an effective usage of points, extending your warlord's leadership range whilst also still being within a unit. Because you're a light chariot, you can join other light chariots in a unit is effective, and you'd then be 18-inch command range. And that's important for your goblins' leadership bonus. I do think they're a very good unit, but you've got to be cautious, obviously, as I said, what you actually run into, because they're not a heavy chariot, and you can't think of them as such. Snotling Pump Wagons, 35 points for a random 2d6 move, toughness 4, strength 4, 3 wounds, with 6 Snotling crew that have got 1 attack each. They're light chariots with impact hits D3+1, loners so they can't be joined by goblin war bosses on wolf chariots. Your impact hits have armor bane 3, and you've only got a 6 up armor. What to say about these? They're not, I don't think, particularly good. At 35 points, you can't expect loads from them. I mean, you can get 3 for 100 points, which can run off a light cavalry unit. But I think with the movement only averaging 7, I'd much prefer 100 points worth of Goblin Wolf Chariots rather than a Snotling Pump Wagon unit. One thing to be said for them is they don't have the Impetuous rule, which is obviously a bonus, but I think just that lack of movement that you're expecting from a light chariot, as well as not having the best damage output. I mean, even the Goblin crew on a Goblin Wolf Chariot have cavalry spears, and the slow movement, man. Like, it's only 7. It's not going to get you into a good position. And if you want something that's just more of a tar pit, you're going with Snotling bases that can be running about quite fast everywhere, averaging more on the Snotling base run than you actually average on the random movement. And if you do want to lean into a random movement style of gameplay, Squig Hoppers are going to be a much better usage of your points. So we pick back up with the Anorak Spider. Now, this is something that can be taken as a mount for a Goblin Odd Git, as well as just on its own as a rare choice. Now, on the main, I actually think that really you just want to be taking these as rare choices, unless there's a good reason that you need the slot moved out of the rare slot into another percentage value cap, which would then be characters. And that's because I don't tend to like split operation models, say like a wizard that can't cast when in combat, can't dispel when in combat, being mounted on a monster that is a lot of points at 310 points that you want to get into combat. So that's the first way of saying on that. Now that does have some exceptions. Obviously, we've seen a lot of vampire counts having necromancers on abyssal terrors. So there is exceptions to that rule. Now, it can boost the combat powers of your goblin character. However, I personally don't like that juxtaposition of role. I prefer everything to be sort of like kept separate, so I know what I'm doing with my spider, and then I know what I'm doing with my goblin champion. And it also comes up that you then can't be pinned in a challenge because you yourself aren't a character as an anorak spider unless you have a character mounted on it in the form of the shaman. So you can't be pinned in a challenge, and you can just tear into units a little bit. On the flip, obviously, you can't hide in a challenge. So, on to the actual anorak spider. Now, one way that I think you can actually get away with running a goblin on anorak spider as basically a chariot mount, you're going to get a lot more wounds, up to 10 wounds, depending on what character you take it with. And a spectral doppelganger character with a one-hit wonder that's the 15-point magic item that's strength 10 AP minus 3. It's one use, but you can use it for that entire turn. So combining that with something like spectral doppelganger would give you a very good one-hit when you needed character, and then keeping it survivable by putting the character on an anorak spider, I think, is a valid way to actually use it. But it's obviously for that one turn, and then you're not too useful. Though I suppose that one turn at strength 10 AP minus 3 might be enough when combined with the spider's additional output. Might be able to just get the job done when you really need it. Now, the actual anorak spider, 310 points. You've got movement 7, so it's just like an average speed for a chariot. Toughness 6, so 1 more than most chariots. At strength 5 is the same. 7 wounds. Initiative 4 and 6 attacks is a good number of attacks. At least as damage output for like chariot type things go. And I'm comparing it to a chariot because of the Howdah special rule. Towards monsters, you're looking at sort of like dragon number of attacks there with 1 less strength but 1 more wound compared to like a normal dragon profile. You've got 8 goblin crew, all of which are just goblin profile, 1 attack each. They have cavalry spears, so we'll go to strength 4 on the charge at AP minus 1, which is quite nice. The actual anorak spider is putting out 1 AP minus 2 wound with multiple wounds D6, and the strikes first profile. And the rest of its attacks, so the other 5, are just with a normal hand weapon. Now that is a bit of a downside because you largely want your big fighty creatures to be going with a good amount of AP. So that is actually one downside of this monster. You can take a spider silk lobber, which has the bombardment, is quite a low strength, cumbersome, but essentially is a 5-inch blast and can help your goblins clear a bit of troops before getting in there. It's not move or fire. It can mean that you've got something to do with your anorak spider if you set up a goblin force with a lot of shooting and artillery. It will give your anorak spider something to do while you're not charging forward with it, because the rest of your goblins won't be doing loads when they get to combat. So you can sit there and take that bit of a passive role with it. And I suppose, and that ties in a little bit with like the shaman thing, although the shaman is a lot more expensive, which is why the spider silk lobber I quite like, the shaman I don't, because you're not also trying to dispel spells with the shaman. Now you've got stomp attacks D6, and being a behemoth, you're at minus 2 AP there. That I don't think cancels out the lack of AP2 on the most of the weapons, because the lack of AP2 on all those attacks that you'd normally get on a dragon type monster is a very, very big downside, I think, of the anorak spider. You've got immune psych, large target, move through cover, which is nice, stubborn, swift stride, and terror. So as it stacks up, I quite like it. Stubborn is quite nice in a goblin army where you've got low leadership as it is, though you largely won't want to be losing combats with the anorak spider. Although you can, it's got a bunch of wounds, but you sort of want to be winning the combats that you put the anorak spider in, because this is going to be your main source of winning combats along with other big monsters. So what are those other big monsters? We have Mangler Squigs, which are actually, I quite like. At 95 points, they're a really cheap addition to the list, at least when we start comparing them to the damage output of other things. They've got 3d6 move like Squig Hoppers, weapon skill 4, strength 6, so impact hits, stomps will be at strength 6, toughness 5 and 4 wounds. A bit on the lighter side, wound size, but at 95 points, I don't think you can complain much. D6 attacks and leadership 4. You've got Behemoth, so any stomps will be at AP -2. You've got a Colossal Fang-filled Gob, which is strength 6 as a user, AP -2 and Killing Blow, which is a nice little addition to have. So that's D6 attacks there at AP -2. You've got impact hits D6, which will all be at strength 6. Your impact hits are actually at AP -3 because of the spiked ball and chains rule. So 2d6 on the charge, including your attacks in that. And then you've got stomp attacks D3. So 2d6 and D3 on the charge, which is a hefty number of attacks. And then if you do die due to your low amount of wounds, you've got the Timber Special rule to actually kill a few more. I actually really like the Mangler Squig. For its points cost is really high output. He's immune to psychology, so your leadership of 4 is completely ignorable, right? Yeah, there's a lot to like about the Mangler Squig. Cheap, high output. I think it's better than the Anorak Spider. On a 50 by 75 mil base, you can fit more in and have them dotted about your army much more easily than you can, say this, I'm going to have to go back to its base size, 100 by 150 is just very unwieldy to have on the battlefield versus a 50 by 75 mil base, which is really easy to maneuver about. So having multiple of these, treating them like Chariots, but just with a really high damage output, really, really good. I really like the unit for the list. Finally, we've got Giants at 200 points. Now, we've been over Giants in a few different reviews now. You can have between a 55 to 50 by 75 mil base. So we, again, on that lower base size, for ease of movement, you're 120 points less than the Anorak Spider. So consider that while we're going into this review bit. You've got movement 6. You've got weapon skill 3, but you don't really care about that. Strength, toughness, and wound 6, with a leadership of 10, immune to psych, unbreakable. So you're going absolutely nowhere, tying things up in combat much more reliably, which is important for Goblin armies, certainly, because you're going to be losing more combats with the Goblins. Orc armies, just really nice to have that in there. Any army, really nice to have unbreakable in there, to just have something that's so reliable that will only ever give ground. Now, the actual attacks, being giant attacks, very good this edition. They've got a good level of output in those attacks. There's no super frustrating ones to play against as well. And I think the giant is in a really nice place. I would have a good argument for... I don't think these, like, at the high end of the game are like super competitive to have a giant. But my impression in seeing them about has been that they are a force to be reckoned with, and can, especially against units rather than against monsters, I have found, they can do quite a bit of work. Now, that's not to say they're not good against monsters. It's just that I find, obviously, a unit struggles a lot of the time to deal with toughness 6, especially 6 wounds floating about. And you can just start stomping on units and stuff like that, jumping up and down. And yeah, really good in the giant. D6 stomp attack, say the jump up and down result gives you D6 plus 1 hits with the strength characteristic of the giant on the unit. So just as random as the Mangler Squig there, but you've obviously got more staying power and are unbreakable. Now, you've got pick up and, which is essentially nominate a unit of infantry or heavy infantry that the giant is engaged with. And that unit must immediately make an initiative check. If failed, the giant picks up the victim and like stuffs them down their pants or something, and they die. If passed, the warrior dodges the attack, and that attack has no effect. Either way, you roll a further d6 on a 4+. The giant continues to attempt to pick things up, and you repeat the process. So if you were, it's just randomness in a bottle, right? You just keep going, 50% chance every time. So you've got an infinitely small chance, but you can do it, of picking up 20 dudes and just stuffing them down your pants. And there's something to really like about that, right? Something to really like. Finally, we're onto the artillery section. Now, artillery can definitely have a place in our lists, I think. At least for certain ones, like particularly bolt throwers are extremely good at 45 points. They're just infinitely spammable up until the points limit of the whatever event you're playing in. Having a high AP, really good. The through and through rule is excellent at the moment, meaning that it doesn't stop at a particular point if failed anymore, if it fails to wound anymore. And they're just really effective all the time. Like, if you were struggling against your opponents as goblins, take some bolt throwers if you've not got them already, and they will do solid work for you. That being said, orc armies definitely benefit from having bolt throwers as well. But I think bolt throwers by now are one of the least contentious things to be saying are quite good, because I think we all know bolt throwers are in quite a strong position this edition of the game versus some of the other artillery pieces. Doomdiver catapults have sadly been slightly shit on in this edition, in that comparatively old editions where it was like strength 5 hits, ignoring armor, nowadays you've just got a stone thrower that, yes, if you hold someone with the stone thrower, can be very good against that single target, but it's just a bit of a knockback, I think, for Doomdivers, because I'm not a massive fan of how stone throwers operate in this edition of the game. Now, again, I think I said this earlier in the guide, this is something that might be due to the meta that currently is going on around where I'm playing, and that we've got more heavily armored, tougher armies, rather than it's usually me bringing the massive regiments if someone is bringing massive regiments of like of toughness 3 troops. Now, if you do, you might get more work out of stone throwers and Doomdivers, but I don't particularly rate their usage at the moment. That being said, stone throwers 75 points versus, and this guide obviously is going to go for stone throwers as well, the main difference being the Doomdiver rule, which is essentially you can correct any scatter of the stone thrower by D3, and that's worth 20 points. Or is it worth 20 points? I think if at the end of the list writing section you've got 20 points left over and you've already taken a stone thrower, I'd upgrade it to a Doomdiver. I wouldn't be recommending putting either in lists based on my own personal preference. So some people really rate them. I just struggle to on either count of the Doomdiver or the stone thrower. It's mainly the bolt thrower that I really think is any good. Now, Orc Bullies for a plus 10 points upgrade to the unit for only 10 points, and with the Bully special rule projecting their leadership not just to the unit, but across multiple units within command range, or multiple artillery pieces within command range, I think one for a group of artillery pieces is worthwhile. I know it's only an upgrade to leadership 7, but that's much better than the Goblins leadership of 4. And all it takes is a destroyed artillery piece for your other artillery pieces to start getting ideas about running away. So I think it's a worthwhile upgrade if you've got 10 points after the first one left over that you don't know what to do with. Maybe worthwhile having 2 so they don't just target your orc bullied unit first. so then you've not got a bully anymore. If you were going to take a stone thrower and leave it out of line of sight behind, say, like your hill, with bolt throwers on top, orc bully going in the stone thrower so it spreads leadership and still can't be shot at, is maybe a good idea. Though I don't know whether I'd be taking a rock lobber for 75 points rather than just taking multiple orc bullies in bolt throwers. Yeah, and that is the end of the Orcs and Goblins guide. So hopefully you think I did an alright job of giving a rundown of the Orcs and Goblins. There will be the Arcane Journal on the way, and if you want that a bit sooner, there's a link below to the Patreon where you can get not only the guides sooner and battle reports sooner, but also access to the Discord, ad-free videos, podcast format audios of all of these Tuesday guides, as well as dice, the new Barefoot dice. And with that, I will catch you in the next one. See you in a bit.